Hello everybody again. Um, we talked about luxury and its significance as the ultimate sort of horizon of desire and consumption, the ultimate standard. And the rising standards and expectations for luxuries in Europe generated what we now call the consumer society. For example, Josiah Wedgwood in the 18th century, the late 18th century, standardized his production using fashionable styles, design, using catalogues, showrooms, and to develop his brand and his ability to sell high quality porcelain, cups and saucers, etc., to a widening group of people, many of whom were attracted to the idea that they would become respectable and decent by buying his products, which were associated with the aristocracy and the royalty. He had assiduously managed to cultivate that image or that association. So design, in a way, modern design starts with an adaptive imitation of luxury goods, which the idea of luxury is very much set by what the very wealthy, what the very powerful desire the most, and that what they value becomes the standard which others then follow. And there are different interpretations of what actually drives consumption, the consumer society. One starts with Thorstein Veblen's notion of conspicuous consumption, that the very wealthy don't just desire things because they're rare and expensive, because they actually want them, but also because they want to, in a way, assert their power through money, through the money they possess, the control they have, through this is reflected in their possessions, and that others then try and follow the lead that they establish. And he was writing in 1899, around 1900, and his thought has been very influential in the field of consumption studies. There are other interpretations that are, if you like, variations of this, or in a way that have developed since. There's one where the inner aims are, in a way, emphasized more, and that is that we desire the good life, the better life, and that we fashion ourselves through our possessions, through what we consume, what we do, the routines we establish. We develop our own sense of self through consumption. And this involves a continuous remaking, because the self in the modern world is not a fixed object decided by others, by God, by the society in which we live, and the rank we're given by others. And this is a determining characteristic of modernity. This is associated with Colin Campbell and a number of other sociologists. Historians like Jan de Vries, they've emphasized that there's an economic and social change in the early modern period where people work harder to attain the good life through consumption, and this leads them to a regime of temperance, of restraint, self-restraint, so they can save up to buy the goods they really want. And this again is an important insight. So in a way, all these perspectives on consumption are not necessarily mutually exclusive or opposing to each other. They tend to add to our understanding of what is going on. And then Maxine Berg, with her luxury project, a very significant historical investigation, showed how adaptive design of exotic luxuries shaped domestic markets, and created what, if you like, the beginnings of a democratization of luxury, enabling more people to enjoy former luxuries. And this is really the beginnings of our consumer society. The role of design in all these interpretations is often assumed rather than talked about, and this is really where I'd like to make you think a little bit more about this, because design in a way becomes a kind of a cultural creator. It creates culture. It by taking one object of desire and making that more available, more widely available, it changes what becomes the norm, what becomes expected. You know, originally cars, for example, were luxury objects for the very rich. They then, through a process of design and adaptation, through engineering, through product design, gradually became, through stylists, gradually became objects that every decent person had in their house, in their garage, especially after the Second World War. So the effect of this is very interesting because it has a huge impact on industry, because success tends to create more consumption in business, and more consumption tends to mean that you are making things more cheaply, and this lower margins and forces you to make even more faster, and to work out ways of getting people to abandon what they've bought within a certain time frame and buy the new model, the latest and the best. And so the consumer finds themselves chasing standards of decency that they see around them and above them particularly, because a person's possessions become a sign to others of their value as an individual. In a society where people don't know other people very well, this is the way people recognize each other, the way they feel that one person is respectable or like them in some way. So it's quite an important... So as cities grow, and this generates more trade, more manufacturing, more consumption, there's a kind of increasing emphasis on technology, technologies of provision, of allowing more and more people to access services. And you get this sort of technological torrent in the 19th century of continuous invention, almost continuous. Bicycles, dyes, chemical dyes, trains, sewage systems, water systems, gas systems, lighting eventually, all these raise standards of living and expectations, and makes the individual increasingly dependent on the provisioning system, also on the money, making the money that enables them to access that provisioning system. So older luxuries become standards and norms, expectations in our lives. And the 19th century middle class become the first, in a way, consumer society, totally dependent upon technological provisioning systems. The department stores, for example, are fascinating insight, mirrors of this. On the one hand, you needed to run a department store, you needed incredibly hard-headed discipline, you needed huge financial resources, you needed amazing organizational ability. You can imagine ordering new goods without telephones, without the technologies we have now. On the other hand, you need to evoke desire in your customers. You need to put them into a luxurious world, a world of extraordinary experience, sensual experience, to make them feel special, to make them feel they're sovereign, the sovereign consumer. The sovereign consumer is a myth, but it's a myth that is based in fact, that this is the experience of walking into, a store where you feel as though you're being treated like a king by the person selling you goods. This is very important. So you get rid of anything that might betray the fact that buying something means a loss to you, because what you're really trying to emphasize to the person that's coming in, the consumer, is that they're going to gain something, and that they're worthy of that gain. So the psychology of consumption becomes terribly important. So the retail revolution seduces the buyer by trying to show the buyer very gently what is lacking what the buyer actually lacks. The psychology of lack becomes terribly, terribly important in consumption. So the new rules around retail and the consumer society is, first of all, you need an abundance of goods to make people feel that there's always something that they don't have. And you need to engender choice. You need to make people feel that they have choice, they have power to choose, even though the choices are actually determined by yourself, by others. You also need low prices so that more people can come in and spend that little bit of money they have on your cheap luxury. And you need accessible luxury. You need luxury that's populux, that's popular. Yeah? And you need to make people feel they always need more. They have to catch up. They have to catch up with others. They have to have the latest and the best. So this is really a field of deception. It's not honesty. It's not where you're being transparent about what you're doing as a seller. Yeah? So that's very, very important to understand that deception is part of the game. As my father used to say, coming from a very different generation, buy beware, caveat emptor. Yeah, so imitation of luxury through technological innovation and design really helps develop the modern consumer society, and the desire from the consumer side for the exotic, for the authentic, for the luxurious, that whether these things can actually help the person develop as a self, grow as a self, becomes part of being modern, and very closely associated with modern. And the department stores are a good kind of representation of this because they exemplify this new consumer system, where the consumer goes in and is told that if they buy this or that, they will be somehow better people, that without this, they lack something. So in the next little talk, I want to talk about the role of design in shaping this and how design can actually work to change taste, change desire itself, sometimes quite radically.